Hello everyone! Welcome back to my channel, or welcome to my channel if you're new. My name is Kristen, this is my booktube, and in today's video we're going to be doing our first reading wrap-up of 2025. So yeah, in today's video we're going to be talking about every single book that I read in January. There are 6 books total that we're going to be talking about today, and the reviews themselves are going to be just a little bit different because, as you may have seen me talk about in one of my previous videos, I did receive this reading journal for my birthday, and I am trying my best in 2025 to keep better track of the books that I'm reading and the thoughts that I have about them. So I figured filling out this reading journal would be a good way to keep track of all that. So this has everything from just a general reading tracker where you just put the title of the book you read, a one-word summary, and then the stars that you would rate it. And then once you get deeper into the book, there are more in-depth review pages where you have like short essay questions and things like that, different ratings for different aspects of the book. And I just feel like this is going to be a great tool in trying to articulate the way that I'm feeling about certain books. So we're going to be basically reading directly from this as we talk about each of the books. The other slight difference in this reading wrap-up compared to other reading wrap-ups that I've done in the past is that I'm not going to talk about them in rating order this time. Normally I would go from lowest to highest rated and talk about each book that I read that month, but this journal is structured chronologically, so we're just going to talk about the books that I read in January in the order that I read them in, not in rating order like I would normally do. So yeah, that is pretty much the gist of the video. So I guess we can go ahead and just dive right in. So the first book that I read in January was actually a reread for me, and that's because I reread Daisy Darker by Alice Feeney. And this is a thriller that came out in 2022, and this is my second time reading it. I believe the first time I read it was probably in 2022, maybe early 2023. In any case, I read this book within the last couple years. So there are a lot of categories on each of these review pages, so we're just gonna work our way through the pages. So I did read the audiobook for this book, and it was 11 hours and 3 minutes total, and I borrowed it through my local library. So shout out to local libraries. Y'all are gonna be the star of this reading wrap up because I believe that most of the books that I read did come from my public library. So we love a public library on this channel. I started this book on the 31st of December and I finished it on the 2nd of January, so quite a quick read for me. I was also off on those days and I pretty much was just sitting on my couch crocheting and listening to audiobooks. So that is part of the reason why I got through this fairly quickly. So the first question that these review pages ask about the books that you read is, what did this story evoke within me? And I wrote that Daisy Darker evoked excitement and anticipation. I've read this book before, but did not recall all of the details, which made this book quite a fun reread for me. I feel like it had been enough time to where I forgot quite a bit of the smaller details within the book. I remembered the main plot points, but I didn't remember how we arrived at those plot points. So it felt like it had been enough time for me to revisit this book and do a reread and have it be enjoyable. And I was right, it was very enjoyable. So the second question that this journal asks is, what aspect of the story captured my attention the most? And for this book, it was definitely the poems. This book is very reminiscent and inspired by And Then There Were None, which at its core, the murders are based around a rhyme about 10 little sailor boys. And it counts them down one by one until you get to the very last one. And this book is not very different, except for instead of a well-known childhood nursery rhyme, there is a poem that is written about the Darker family. And there is one line about each person in the Darker family, and that is the order that they are murdered in. So I said that I loved the nods to And Then There Were None. If you've been around for a bit, you would know that is my favorite Agatha Christie book. I love that book so much. I think it's such a good mystery. And so obviously I'm into stories with similar vibes. And then I said, it's so fun to be able to see the inspiration, and it clearly stays in the inspiration lane without it venturing into retelling or rip-off territory. Then the third question it asks is, what insights or wisdom can I glean from this tale? entail? And this is a funny question to ask because some of these thrillers I don't really have very good answers for, other than just like stranger danger, don't do drugs, that kind of thing. But for Daisy Darker, I put that honesty may actually be the best policy. At least for the Darkers, it should have been. Then they probs would be alive. So yeah, there's a lot of lying, a lot of secrets in this book, and overall, honesty probably would have saved a lot of the Darkers' lives, if not all of the Darkers' lives. Then there's also this little box up here. I think you're probably supposed to do like a little doodle or something, but I'm not much of a doodler. So what I decided to do is to put a quote in this box from each of the books that I read. And the one I chose for Daisy Darker was, "If I do know more than most, it is because I read. Books will teach you anything you want to know, and they tend to be more honest than people." And this quote is spoken by the grandmother in the story, Daisy Darker's grandmother to be exact. And this is a very appropriate quote for her because she is an author. So it would make sense that she would like books more than people. I just really liked that quote. I thought it was one that kind of stuck in my mind. And so I picked it out to write down for this book. Then the last essay type section on this review page just asks what your overall takeaways and favorites are from this book. And I said that this is a very fun thriller. It was my first Alice Feeney book, and it was still captivating the second time reading it. The book does a good job of taking inspiration from Agatha Christie without it feeling like a ripoff or a retelling. It captures the same murder in a locked room vibe while being more modern in the storytelling. I really love Alice Feeney's writing style, and I can't wait to read more from her. I think this book was really well done. I still really enjoyed it the second time, and it's one of those that's really fun to revisit, even if it's been a while since you've read the first book. I still had enough of the plot in my mind to really alter how I experienced the book, and that's my favorite thing to do with thrillers. That's why I love a thriller with a really good twist that I didn't see coming, because then it kind of feels like I have a second opportunity to read the book again from a new perspective. Whereas if it's a thriller that I just saw the twist coming from miles away, it's less likely that I'm going to go back and reread that book because I already knew what was going on for most of the book and I was just waiting for the characters to play catch up. So why would I want to do that again, you know? I'm always finding myself gravitating back towards the thrillers that really did surprise me and just left me slack-jawed in the end. And I remember this being one of those books where the twist was something that I didn't really see coming, and I really enjoyed the writing style. This being one of my first Alice Feeney books, I think kind of helped with that as well, just because I was completely new to this author, so I hadn't read some of the other works that she's done that have quite high acclaim. And since my first read of this book and my introduction to Alice Feeney, I've found that her writing style and the way that she does her twists and misdirection I really enjoy. So of course, I've basically gone through her entire catalog, and she even has a new one that I should read at some point in the near future. But yeah, overall, I really love this book a lot. So the last section on this page is this little side right here where you can rate 1 through 5, a bunch of different aspects of the book, and then there's a one-word summary at the bottom. And for this one, I gave the characters 5 stars, the plot 5 stars, writing style 5 stars, world building I gave 4 stars, pacing I gave 4 stars, structure I gave 4 stars, resolution I gave 5 just because that's where the twist was. I didn't see it coming, and I thought the resolution was pretty well done. It was very reminiscent of Poirot giving his, big grand reveal when the culprit was revealing how exactly they pulled off everything that they did in the book. It just reminded me so much of Poirot and that kind of vibe. Even though this book isn't really a nod to Poirot specifically, it's definitely firm in the fact that it's referencing the standalone And Then There Were None Agatha Christie book. But it is fun to see those little nods to Agatha Christie's writing and Poirot and stuff like that, just in the way that the story is told. I think that that's probably like a little Easter egg for other Agatha Christie fans like myself. So it definitely hit its mark with me specifically. And I think that it's just a proven and effective way to tell a mystery story. Why would you not take notes from the Queen of Mystery herself, especially when you are doing a book that is heavily inspired by her? It just makes sense. So, and then the overall rating I gave this book was a 4.75. I don't think it was perfect, but I did really enjoy this book the first time that I read it, and I also really enjoyed it on my reread as well. And then for the one-word summary for this book, I just put secrets, because Lord, do the Darkers have secrets. It's literally like the whole point of this book is that the Darkers have a bunch of secrets and they have been lying for decades to hide them. So that is pretty much the crux of the conflict in this book. And yeah, honesty probably would have been the best policy for these people, but they just kept lying, you know, up until the bitter end. All right, book number 2 that I read in January was another Alice Feeney book, and this one is called Good Bad Girl. So Good Bad Girl is very much a story about motherhood. Good mothers, bad mothers, estranged mothers, runaway daughters, kidnapped children. There's all of that within this one book. The book really centers around Edith and her daughter, as well as the nurse that is taking care of her in her assisted living home. Edith is essentially put in this care home against her will by her children, and she forms a relationship with I don't know if she's technically a nurse, but she's like a health aide that works in an assisted living home. I don't think she's like a registered nurse or whatever, but she works there and she has frequent contact with Edith, enough to where she gets to know her and they form a friendship, to the point where the nurse is low-key breaking the rules for Edith. Like, Edith's daughter got rid of her dog Dickens, right? Gave it to the RSPCA because they're in the UK and they have the RSPCA instead of the ASPCA. Anyways, Dickens is at the RSPCA, right? Daughter gave Edith's dog away when she moved her into an assisted care home because they did not accept pets. Obviously, this was quite distressing for Edith and she was very upset about it. So the assisted care nurse went to the RSPCA and adopted Dickens and smuggles him into work so that Edith can be with her dog again. Like, that's the kind of stuff that this nurse is doing for Edith. And over the course of the book, we slowly learn why Edith has such a strained relationship with her daughter, the history that they have together. And then we also learn more about the nurse and her own issues with her mother as she basically works with Edith to conspire to break her out of this assisted care home. And the story just kind of takes off from there in a bunch of different directions. It is a very messy story on purpose. The timelines are quite confusing. There's a lot of time jumps, several different POVs, and just a lot to do with motherhood. This is a book that the one-word summary that I gave it was motherhood, because that is really the core of what this book is about. It's about mother-daughter relationships, strained relationships, rebuilding relationships, breaking them, all of that stuff. But it is indeed a thriller. Because also at the same time at this assisted care home, there are deaths happening. There are some suspicious deaths involving the residents of the care home. And then there is an even more suspicious death of the care home manager herself. And this kind of kicks everything off and it just really snowballs from there, because it sounds bad to say, but I honestly low-key kind of forgot about some of the murders in this book when I was writing my little review of it. Yeah, so there's a lot that happens if there's stuff that overshadows multiple murders that happen in this book that I just completely forgot about for a bit. So this is a thriller that came out in 2023. I did do audio for this one as well. It was 9 hours and 20 minutes long, and once again got it from my library. I started it on the 2nd of January and finished it on the 8th, so pretty quick turnaround as well. Then for what did this story evoke within me, I said that this story made me reflect and appreciate my own relationship with my mother. And now I want to go give her a hug, LOL, which is funny because I did literally just come home from my parents' house where I did in fact give my mother a hug. So mission accomplished on that one. Then the second one, what aspect of the story captured my attention the most? I said that I definitely thought that I had all of the twists figured out halfway through, but I was wrong, which is a rookie mistake with Miss Feeney. There are a lot of thriller authors that get dubbed the Queen of Twists or the King of Twists. And for me, Alice Feeney is the Queen of Twists. Like, as of right now, in this moment in time, she is my Roman Empire for twists. She is the gold standard for a twist, in my opinion. If there is one thing that Miss Feeney knows how to do, it's do misdirection and get me thinking that I know what's going on when I have no idea what's going on. Honestly, me in everyday life, to be quite honest, I never know what's going on for the most part. And then for the insights or wisdom that I can glean from this tale, I just said how far a mother will go to protect a child, even one that they don't seem to love all that much. And that's just more commentary on the strained relationships between mothers and daughters that are in this book, where there are some mothers that don't really seem to care for their daughters all of that much until push comes to shove and their daughters need them, and then they come through. So that's just more on the relationship dynamics between mothers and daughters that's present in this book. And then for the quote, I picked, "Sometimes bad things happen to good people, so good people have to do bad things." And I'm pretty sure that that is a quote that is spoken by Edith in this book. And then for my overall takeaways, I'm gonna kind of rephrase what I have written here because it has spoilers in it and I don't want to give you spoilers for this book right now. So my overall takeaways were that, once again, I thought that I had a twist figured out because I was focused so much on small details about certain characters that matched other parts of the story, but I latched onto the wrong details. I did fall for one of the red herrings that Miss Feeney dangled so temptingly in front of me. And I went through so many scenarios in my head and I never guessed the correct ending that actually ended up happening in this book. It was another great end of book twist from Miss Feeney that I thoroughly enjoyed. And I'm very much looking forward to reading her newest book, Beautiful Ugly, pretty soon. I do believe that I have it on my bookshelf in my room. So she's there, ready and waiting whenever I'm ready. And then for the other reviews, I put the characters at a 4, the plot at a 4, writing style is a 5 with Miss Feeney. I love the way that she does thrillers. World building, I gave a 4, pacing a 5, structure a 4, resolution a 5, and overall, I rated this book 4 stars. Then third book on the list, and we're finally getting a different author from Alice Feeney, and this one is by Riley Sager, and it is The Only One Left. So this came out in 2023, and I believe that this is his newest book, and I've been seeing this book get a lot of traction online, at least in the book circles I fly in. But everyone that I've seen read this book has had nothing but good things to say about it, and I'm one of them, okay? I absolutely loved this book. So The Only One Left is set in the 80s. So we have the whole like lack of technology kind of vibe. It was very reminiscent of Stephen King for me. It also didn't really help that it was set in Maine, which is a very common setting for Stephen King. And with it being set in the 80s, it just really gave that King horror kind of vibe, you know? And in this book, our main character is a home health aide who, unlike the previous main character who worked in an assisted care home, our main character and the only one left is a live-in assisted care nurse. And she has been assigned to work at this notorious house, well, mansion actually, on the cliffs in Maine called Hope's End, and to help take care of the owner of the house, Lenora Hope. Sounds like a pretty sweet gig, right? You get to live in this fancy mansion, taking care of this elderly, wealthy lady. There's great views of the ocean because the house is on a cliff. It seems like a pretty good gig, right? However, Lenora Hope has a bit of a past, a bit of a history, and she's a bit of a local boogie woman. That sounds so weird, but boogeyman is not right. She's a local boogie woman. That makes it sound like she likes to dance. That's not what she's doing. Actually, Lenora's not doing any dancing at all because she's paralyzed, but we'll get to that. But essentially what happened is in 1929, there were multiple deaths that occurred at Hope's End. And the people that died were all of Lenora's family, her immediate relative, her sister, Virginia, her father, and her mother. And when the cops arrived, Lenora was, quite literally, the only one left. As you would expect, she swore up and down that she was not the one that caused any of the deaths to her family. And because they could not find any evidence to link her to any of the deaths, they never prosecuted her for any of them either. So it kind of became a local legend that Lenora Hope got away with killing her family. And it's also very reminiscent of the Lizzie Borden murders. There is a rhyme that the local children have made up about Lenora Hope murdering her family. I don't remember exactly how it starts, but it's something along the lines of Lenora Hope hung her sister with a rope, something like stabbed her father with a knife, took her mother's happy life. So it's become this urban legend that gets passed around by local kids, and our main character is one of those local kids. So she knows all about the legends of Lenora Hope, but she also knows the reality of the state that Lenora Hope is in. And when she got her assignment, she got the briefing that, Lenora's in her 70s. She has had several strokes. She is unable to walk and she is paralyzed on most of the right side of her body. She basically has very limited function in her left hand, and that's it. She can't speak, she can't walk, she can't really do anything for herself. So our main character, being the logical person that she is telling herself that, there's no way that Lenora could actually hurt me in the state that she is in now. Even if she was guilty of all of the things that people think that she is, there's no way that she can do anything to hurt me at this point in time. She is too old, too weak, and too dependent on other people. So she kind of uses that to calm herself down. And then once she gets there, she starts learning more about her predecessor. And she finds out that she left in the middle of the night suddenly. And the more that she finds out about her predecessor, and the more that she gets to know Lenora, the more she realizes that there is a lot more going on at Hope's End than she could have ever imagined. And maybe Lenora is a bit more of a threat than she lets on. And I'm like getting chills just like thinking about it again. It is so good. I really loved this thriller so much. I definitely think that this is now my hallmark for a good Riley Sager thriller. Before this one, I really liked Lock Every Door and Home Before Dark. I think that those were probably my top two from Riley Sager, but I think that this one just really blew those two out of the water. I think that the story was so well done in this, and I really enjoyed it from start to finish. I was quite engrossed in it. I did have to take it just a little bit slower because I did read this at the same time I was reading Good Bad Girl, and just having two main characters that are in similar fields, even if they're set in different countries, just made me have to take it a little bit slower so that I could keep the story straight. Once they got going and they started going off in their separate directions, it wasn't that bad. Those first couple chapters in both of those books, it was a little confusing, especially with the time jumps being different, because Good Bad Girl is set in, modern day London. And then the only one left is set in 1983 in Maine. Very different settings. So it's just a little bit hard for me to keep up with at first, but once we got established in the story, it wasn't that bad. So I did do audio for this book, and this book was pretty much right at 12 and a half hours. It was 12 hours and 32 minutes, and I listened to this one on Spotify with my 15 allotted hours of audiobook time a month. I will never understand why they did an hour limit and not just like a one book a month type of thing. I just don't get it. Spotify, why? Because there are some books that are longer than 15 hours and then some books that are shorter, and it's a messy way to do audiobooks, and I don't like it. Anyways, I could go ranting all day on that, but we got things to do. So let's go ahead and just move on to the next thing. So I started reading this book on January 3rd and I finished it on the 9th. And then for what did this story evoke within me, I said that this story was reminiscent of Stephen King. And for me, I was drawn in from the start, and I even cried a little bit at the end. So this book evoked tears from me. Just a little bit. I just teared up. I wasn't full on sobbing, but I was tearing up just a little bit. Then for what aspect of the story captured my attention the most, I said that I racked my brain so much trying to figure out the twists and was mostly unsuccessful. By the time it was all revealed, my jaw was on the floor. So for what insights or wisdom can I glean from this tale, I said that it's never too late to fulfill your dreams and live a happy life. You'll have to read the book to figure out what I mean by that, but that was the lesson that I learned. And for the quote, I picked, "It's possible to love someone while hating what they have done." And that is spoken by our main character. I won't tell you who she's talking about, but I do believe there's truth in that. And for my overall takeaway and favorites, I put, I loved, in all caps, this story. Not only was the story intriguing and mysterious, but I did not guess 90% of the twists, and that is always a fun experience. I do remember there was one big twist that I did guess. I don't think that I got it 100% correct, but I knew something was suspicious and I knew something wasn't right. So I was on the trail. I just didn't quite figure it out all the way, but my nose, I sensed something. I sensed a disturbance. I sensed some suspicious activity. And then I said that the red herrings and the misdirection were so good that it had me questioning everything. There were a few plot points that did not quite work for me logically with the story, and it felt like they were purely there for misdirection's sake. But even still, that's not significant enough for me to dock it all that much. And I think that this may very well be my new favorite Riley Sager book. I do think that this is going to become my new benchmark for Riley Sager books that I read in the future. I just think that it is so well done, and I'm intentionally being vague because I do know that this book has received pretty good reviews so far from people that I know in real life, on the internet, just general Goodreads ratings. It seems to be rated pretty highly. I've also thrown this book out there for my workbook club. If at any point we need a good thriller to read, I would happily reread this one for sure. Then for the other reviews, I gave the characters 4 stars, the plot 5, the writing style 5, world building I gave a 5. He really did build on that like creepy 80s Stephen King kind of vibe, and I really enjoyed that. Oh, I forgot to mention, there's also a whole part of the plot where as things are coming out and the walls around the Hope family and the secrets that they have, as those are being revealed, the cliff that the manor is on is crumbling at the same time. And it's just a really cool visual to have, that as all of this ugly history of the Hope family is coming to light and as things are being discovered, the house itself is like warping and bending and breaking. There are cracks that are growing on the walls because the cliff that it's on is literally crumbling as the story is happening. And I feel like that just really added to the foreboding nature of Hope's End and all of the horrible things that have happened there. Even before the deaths happened, there's so much more that goes on in there. And our main character is learning about it slowly from Lenora, because even though Lenora can't verbally speak anymore, what she can do with the very limited use of her left hand is type. And she has a typewriter that our main character uses to communicate with her. And through that typewriter, Lenora starts telling the main character everything. And so as we are learning more about what happened in 1929 to her family, the house itself is quite literally falling apart. It's just such a cool method of storytelling, you know? It's very symbolic, but at the same time, they talk about how it was a folly to build a house on this cliff in the first place. Like I believe they talk about how when Lenora's father decided to build on that cliff, surveyors were telling him that he was crazy because like that cliff's gonna fall into the ocean one day and you're gonna lose everything. And he built it there anyway because he just has that hubris in him where he just thinks that, you know, nothing bad will happen to him because he is him. And I just think that that's such a cool part of the story, and I really like how that is integrated into the crumbling of the Hope legacy as the house itself is crumbling and being pulled into the sea. So for the other reviews that I have, I gave the characters 4 stars, the plot 5, writing 5, world building 5, pacing, I gave like a 4.5. I think it could have been paced just a little bit better, but overall, very great pacing. Resolution, I gave a 5, and overall, I gave this book a 4.75. And my one-word summary is just twists with an exclamation mark because, oh lordy, this is a twisty tale if I ever did see one. Goodness. So yeah, the only one left I think is going to be my new Riley Sager intro suggestion, because the same things that I love about Alice Feeney and her twists were present in this book. And I just feel like this is the best thriller that I have seen from Riley Sager, in my opinion. For book number 4, we have God of the Woods by Liz Moore. So this is a mystery/thriller, and it was published in 2024. You may have seen this book floating around the internet. It has been very popular. I've seen a lot of people talk about it, a lot of people singing its praises, and I will say that I was a little underwhelmed by it. And honestly, I don't know if that's so much the book's fault as it is the way it was marketed and it being a little overhyped, in my opinion. So this book is really set around a summer camp in, I want to say like upstate New York. If it's not upstate New York, it's in, I almost said the Pacific Northeast. What? If not in upstate New York, it is in New England somewhere. Like, it's very much where rich kids from Manhattan get dumped for the summer. At least that's the vibe I got. Because it is a summer camp that is months long, like 2-ish months, I think, from what I understood from the book. And it is owned by the Van Laar family. The land has been owned by the Van Laars for like 150 years or something like that. This book takes place mostly in the 70s, but there is like a split timeline, bouncing back and forth between like the 50s to the 60s to the 70s, but it's all within that like 2-decade range. So this rich family owns this summer camp, and in the 50s, the Van Laars actually had a child go missing. Their oldest son, who is named Peter Van Laar, he's like Peter the Third, I think, and because there are so many Peters in this family, they called him Bear instead. So I will be referring to him as Bear. And when Bear was 8 years old, he was supposed to go on a nature hike in the woods with his grandfather. And as they were about to get to the trailhead, Bear says that he forgot his pocket knife and he really wanted to bring it with him. So he doubles back to the house to get his pocket knife while his grandpa waits by the trailhead for him to come back. And Bear never returns. So that is mystery number 1. Then fast forward about 15 years. And Bear's younger sister, Barbara, who is now a teenager, is attending the summer camp that is owned by her parents. And I can't remember if she's like forced to go to the summer camp or she like wants to go to the summer camp. I can't remember what the situation there is, but Barbara is a bit of a rebellious kid. In the story, she has gotten in trouble in school before. She's snuck out to meet boys, like that kind of thing. Just, you know, rebellious teenage stuff. But yeah, so we have this family who has now had both of their children disappear in the woods. So the dual timeline in this book really centers around each of those kids disappearing and the searches and events following that. There's not really much similarities in the two differences. I mean, like I said, Bear was about 8 years old and he was going on a hike with his grandpa. He wasn't at the summer camp or anything like that. Barbara was at the summer camp. She essentially sneaks out of her tent at night and then just doesn't come back. So very different situations for both of the Van Laar kids and a lot to unpack with both of them. I counted this as a physical book because I did read more than half of it physically. I started this book on Spotify and I ran out of listening hours. I think I listened to maybe like 4-ish hours of this 15-hour book before I had to switch to reading the physical book. So I counted it as a physical book because I physically read more than half of it. And this book is 478 pages long. I started it on the 10th of January and I finished it on the 15th. And that is mostly because our book club meeting for this book was on the 16th. So once again, coming up to the wire on the book club books, but made it nonetheless. So what did this story evoke within me? This story really made me think of summer camps that I attended as a kid. I only went to like shorter Girl Scout camps. In my kid brain, I don't know how long they were. Maybe they were like a weekend or something like that. Maybe a week in the summertime. Definitely not months, that's for sure. But it did make me think of the summer camps that I went to as a kid. And it low-key also kind of reminded me of the beginning of The Parent Trap where they're at the summer camp. I don't know why. I think that's just like the first media image of a summer camp that comes to my mind. Or you know what? A more accurate one might be the summer camp from It Takes Two with Mary-Kate and Ashley Olsen. That is a pull from the archives, if you will. I loved that movie as a kid. Oh my gosh, I forgot about that movie. But also that summer camp vibe. So what aspect of the story captured my attention the most? I said that Bear's disappearance had me really locked in because I was thinking of every possibility of how this 8-year-old boy vanished. And I low-key kind of forgot about Barbara from time to time. Even though she is like supposed to be the active missing child that is, you know, the pressing issue, I still was more focused on trying to figure out what happened to Bear than what happened to Barbara. I don't know why that is. Maybe it's because Barbara was a rebellious teenager, so the runaway theory kind of made sense, especially when you get to know her parents. But for Bear, because he was a kid and he was only 8, and you know, the circumstances of his disappearance were so different, I was more focused on trying to figure out what happened to him than I was what happened to Barbara. And so yeah, that was where my focus was. I was lasered in on Bear, because in my mind, you know, Barbara's a 15-year-old who's grown up in these woods. I had a feeling that she could probably handle herself better than an 8-year-old boy would. But yeah, so I was really focused on Bear for the most part. And what insights and wisdom can I glean from this tale? Probably mostly that drugs are bad. I'm not going to go any more into detail than that, but yeah, drugs are bad and don't mix them with alcohol. Pro tip. PSA, the more you know. Then for the quote that I picked a quote that I felt like is the only part of the book that kind of explains the title. And it's a part towards the beginning where the camp counselor who runs the Van Laar's summer camp, whose name is TJ, she's basically giving the introduction to the new campers and telling them stuff about safety. You know, don't go wandering in the woods alone. If you do wander into the woods and you feel like you're lost, don't just keep wandering. Sit down and just start yelling for help. And she's basically talking about the origin of the word panic and how it's important not to panic in the woods. And she goes through this whole spiel about how, you know, the term panic comes from Pan, the god of the woods. There's our title. And the quote that I wrote says, "To panic," said TJ, "was to make an enemy of the forest. To stay calm was to be its friend." And I just picked that quote because it has the most to do with why the title is what it is. And it really sets the stage for how easy it is to get lost in the woods and how disorienting a big forest like this can be. And then for my overall takeaways and favorites, I said that this story was interesting and I was engaged overall, but I do think that this is more of a mystery and less of a thriller. And that was kind of what I was talking about when I said that it was not really marketed in the best way, because this book was pushed to me specifically as a thriller. It was not thrilling. There was not a single moment in this book where I felt anxious, felt like I was anticipating what was happening next, that I was really on the edge of my seat. You know, it just, for lack of a better word, was not thrilling. And that's fine, but just don't market it as a thriller if it's not thrilling. You know, that's my biggest complaint, is just that it was pushed to me as a thriller and there is not really a single thrilling thing that happens. In my opinion, it's just more of a mystery than anything else. And I feel like I would have enjoyed it a lot more if it was just labeled a mystery and not a thriller. It was very information heavy and less atmospheric than thrillers tend to be. And I just mean like that tense kind of atmosphere that you get from a thriller when you know that something bad is about to happen, but the main character doesn't know yet. There's more suspense, there's more anticipation being built than there was in this book. I also think that there were too many POVs. I think that the amount of time jumps that were happening, coupled with the excessive amount of POVs that were in this book, were just too much. I said, although I do love multiple perspectives and timelines, this one was almost too much on both fronts. At times, I had a hard time keeping track of the characters and timelines, and I feel like it did take away from the story a bit for me. Although I really enjoyed this book, I just think that it had potential to be way more thrilling than it was. So yeah, the multiple perspectives thing, there were just some characters, especially in like the earlier flashbacks to when Bear disappeared, that I just think didn't really need to be there at all. I think that they could have been effectively communicated through the point of view of another character rather than giving a whole other point of view for a character that is only pertinent to part of the story. I just think that it made it more complicated than it needed to be. And it really had me feeling like I needed to study a character list for this book to keep up with who all of the players were. And I know that that does add to the misdirection and the red herrings and stuff like that, but I just have issues with thrillers and mysteries that use information overload as a way to make the twist less obvious. I just think that it's a little bit lazy in my opinion, and this did kind of feel like all of the points of view that were added in weren't really to shed light on parts of the story, but more so just to beef out the book and cause you to get confused. I can think of at least 2 or so characters that did not need their own POVs in this book at all, really. like one of them dies like while they're looking for Bear. He has a heart attack and he dies. So like, did we really need his point of view? I don't think we did. It's like, I don't think we really needed to hear his inner monologue, you know? Like, it didn't add anything to the story for me. Like, when I was thinking back on his POV after I finished the book, I just didn't really feel like it needed to be there, you know? I feel like the book could have been exactly the same without that chapter in it. I think that was one of my bigger qualms with the book, and the other one is just, I feel like this book was just overhyped. And I think because it was hyped up so much online, I just expected way more out of it than it actually delivered. And I was disappointed because of that. And that in itself is not necessarily the book's fault, but it is disappointing nonetheless. And it's happened to me with several books before. It's like, I don't know if people were just bandwagoning because this book was getting a lot of traction and people just wanted to also be in the club of people that love this book. But I definitely could see several points that could be improved in this book. And I don't even think that it's in like the top 3 books that I read in January. I don't regret reading it or anything, but I just think that I read better in January, and I have read better from other authors. So all in all, I felt like this book was just underwhelming for me. I just expected way more out of it than what I got. For characters, I gave it a 4. For plot, I gave it a 3. Writing style, I gave it a 4. World building, I gave it a 3. Pacing, a 4. Structure, a 4. Resolution, a 4. And overall rating, a 4. But I would say that as far as 4s go, this is like very, very low 4. I do overall think it was still pretty good, but I do think that it had a lot of room to be a lot better too. All right, book number 5. And we are back to Riley Sager again because I read Final Girls. So this is one of Riley Sager's earliest books. It came out in 2017. And this book is pretty much what it sounds like. This book is about a group of final girls, which, if you don't know what a final girl is, a final girl is the girl at the end of a horror movie who survives all of the carnage and lives to tell the tale. And this is normally a term that I see used with slasher films, but it has made its way into the world of true crime, and people attribute the term final girl to also women who survive mass homicide events. And there are really 3 final girls that are prominent in this book. The first one, I believe her name is Michelle. I don't know why I thought one of the final girls was named Michelle. Her name was Lisa Milner in the book, and I don't know why I thought her name was Michelle, but it's Lisa. It's definitely Lisa. I think her name is Michelle. I could be wrong, but... You are wrong. Her name is Lisa, not Michelle. There is nary a Michelle in this book. Her name is Lisa. She was in a sorority in Indiana, I believe, in the 90s, and she survived an attack on her sorority house where several of her sorority sisters were murdered, and she is the only one that survived. The second final girl is named Samantha Boyd, and she was working at a motel in Florida when a serial killer called the Sack Man came in and basically murdered everyone there, and she was the only survivor. And I believe that took place in the early 2000s, if my math is right. They didn't give us any years for any of these, but I kind of worked backwards from the most recent final girl to figure out when the other ones took place. So the third final girl is our main character, and her name is Quincy. If I remember right, I think hers was around 2007, and she had gone to a cabin in the woods with her friends called Pine Cottage for one of her roommates' birthdays, and while they were there, they were the victims of a deranged murderer who killed all of them, and Quincy is the only survivor. I don't know about the other final girls, but I do know that Quincy, because she is our main character in her inner monologue, she talks about how, as a final girl, people have suspicions about what her role was in the death of her friends. Some people even think that she is the one that committed the murders. She also doesn't have a lot of memories from that night in Pine Cottage, so she can't even really tell people exactly what happened because she does not remember. It has now been 10 years since the events at Pine Cottage that made Quincy a final girl. And that is how I kind of pieced together when these happened, because I worked backwards from, this book came out in 2017, 10 years before that, 2007. And I believe it said how many years in between each of the 3 final girls there were. So that's how I kind of figured out when each of them happened. But yeah, these 3 final girls are in totally different states, totally different events, different years, different decades, basically. But the one thing that they all have in common is that they are all final girls. So throughout the years, they have been mentioned together in different news articles and things like that. So they all know of each other. And some of them have briefly talked, like Quincy reached out to Michelle after the events at Pine Cottage, as did Samantha. So they know of each other. They've vaguely communicated, but they aren't like close or anything. And then Michelle turns up dead by apparent suicide, and Samantha does not believe that it was a suicide. She believes that someone killed Michelle and they are going after final girls. So I was really into the premise of this book. I know it's not necessarily original. I've seen several books with the final girl premise. I know there's another one that's called like the Final Girl Support Group, and I think there's even another one that's just straight up called Final Girls, but I wanted to read this one just because I've read a bunch of other Riley Sager books before, and I wanted to read this one as well. And I definitely don't think that this is Riley Sager's best at all, but it was still a fun read overall, and I still enjoyed it for the most part. We'll get into my gripes about it in just a second. So this was another audiobook that I listened to, and it was 12 hours and 23 minutes. And it's another library book that I borrowed. I started this on the 15th of January and finished it on the 17th of January. And for what did this story evoke within me? I said that it evoked a mix of emotions from pity to frustration with the main character, especially in the vigilante justice scene in Central Park. I will talk more about that in a second. What aspect of the story captured my attention the most? The main plot did have my head spinning for a bit at first. I was distrusting of the fiance, which I always am in thrillers. I'm always suspicious of the significant other's main character. I'm always thinking that they got something going on, something up their sleeve. And this one, he just seemed a little too nice, a little too perfect. I didn't trust him, but apparently I should have just trusted him. Apparently he's just a nice guy. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry, Jeffrey. You're not watching this because you're a fictional person, but I'm sorry that I doubted you. I'm sorry that I was suspicious of you. You did nothing wrong. It was like, honestly, your biggest crime was being too nice, I think. And lastly, I said, but I did figure out one of the main twists, and that is who killed everyone at Pine Cottage. I did figure that one out. I wouldn't say really early on, but I did figure it out before it was revealed. I had an inkling, a festering grudge, if you will, a distrust of a certain character, and I thought that was just, you know, my own inherent biases, but it turns out it was not. They were not a great person. Clearly, they were murdering people, but murder does not a good person make, in case you needed that little PSA. Okay, and then what insights or wisdom can I glean from this tale? All I put was IDK, vet out new visitors in your home, don't trust cops, how to be a final girl. I don't know if there were any like actual tangible lessons or wisdom that I could glean from this book, but that's what I wrote down. Then for the little quote, I picked, I firmly believe it is possible for people not to be harnessed to bad things from their past. People can recover, they can move on. And I believe that our main character says that. I could be wrong, but I think that she's the one that says that, and I think it's like towards the end of the book, like when they're wrapping stuff up. Then for the overall takeaways and favorites, I said, overall, I liked the premise of the book and I like how it was structured for the most part. I think I would have rated it higher if not for the Central Park assault. So, what happens in Central Park in this book? I'm going to tell you because I don't think it really messes with much of the plot at all. Basically, Sam and Quincy go to Central Park to do some vigilante justice. The first time they go, they kind of sit in the bushes and they just wait to see if a woman is going to be attacked by a man. And when that does happen, they go, they intervene, and, you know, they save the woman from getting mugged, and then they tell her, like, don't walk in Central Park at night, you know, be smarter. I know it seems like a lot faster to just cut through the park, but don't do that. Walk around, get a taxi. The cab fare is worth saving your life, that kind of thing. Which, you know, it's a little weird to, you know, go to a park and hang out at 1 a.m. just waiting for someone to be attacked so that you can spring into action like that. So I didn't like that. It gave me a little weird vibe the first time that they did that, as it should have, because then they do it again. and there's not a woman that gets attacked. So Sam thinks it's a bright idea to make Quincy the bait and give her a purse that looks like it's full of stuff. It's full of paperback books. There's nothing valuable in there, but it looks like it's full of stuff. So Quincy basically acts as the bait, as the decoy, and this homeless man comes up to her and doesn't threaten her, doesn't try to mug her. He just asks her for some money. And he does plead. He says stuff along the lines of like, come on, I know you have some money to spare. Can you please just give me some money? And, you know, they do say that he looks like he's a drug addict, and that's confirmed later when, you know, things transpire and the cops get involved. But this man's only crime was being homeless and asking for money. And what does Quincy do? Quincy beats the ever-living crap out of him, like within an inch of his life. And then they just leave him there. And I'm not kidding, I almost turned the book off when that happened. I was like just dumbfounded that that was actually something that was in this book. I hated it. I hated it so much. I thought it was very unnecessary for a plot point. The whole point of it was that Samantha wanted to see what Quincy did when she was like in fight or flight mode, I guess. But like, you don't need to put a random homeless man in the middle of that. Like, his life is rough enough. You don't need to drag him into your deranged plan, okay? I really hated that plot point. And honestly, that dropped the book quite a lot for me, because after that happened, I was like, I don't even know if I want to finish this book at this point. But I powered through anyway, probably only because I have read other Riley Sager books. I don't know if I would have finished this if it wasn't Riley Sager, if I'm honest. I probably would have, because it takes quite a bit for me to DNF a book, and I mean, if I didn't DNF Small Game, I don't think I would have DNF'd this book. But in any case, I really hated that plot point. I thought it was horrible, and I can see why this book is not rated as high as many other Riley Sager books. But yeah, so that's what happened in Central Park, and that's why I hated it. Yeah, so Quincy almost kills a man for asking for money. She's also quite well off, by the way. Like, Quincy makes it a point to talk about how, like, she's made so much money off of, like, suing people for, like, I don't even remember what, but, like, she has, like, all of these lawsuits and stuff that she's gotten money from, like, you know, news outlets reporting on her when, or, like, falsely report. I don't remember what she's gone to court for, but she's gotten money from all of these lawsuits to do with her being a final girl, and she's bought a very nice apartment on like the Upper West Side in Manhattan. The girl has money. I don't know. I don't know. I just don't think that being homeless is like a crime worthy of dying. Call me radical for not thinking that homeless people just deserve to die. But like, he's a human being. Like, he did not deserve what Quincy did to him, even if it's fake. So overall, it was a decent thriller, but with that plot point and the fact that I know Sager can do a lot better than this, a 3.5 felt more than generous, in my opinion. So for the other reviews, I gave the characters 4 stars, the plot 3, writing style 5, because the writing was still good overall. I just really did not like the content of certain parts of this book. World building, I gave it a 4, pacing, I gave it a 3, structure a 3, resolution a 2, cause yeah, I didn't really care for the resolution in this book much either. And then overall rating, I gave it a 3.5, as we have discussed. And for the one-word summary, I put slasher, because it's like the aftermath of a slasher. Alrighty, and the final book on my January wrap-up is First Lie Wins by Ashley Elston. And this is a thriller that came out in 2024. This is a book that a girl in my book club was talking about when we were talking about God of the Woods. And she was saying that it was one of her favorite thrillers that she read in 2024. So I found it at my local library, and I put a hold on that audiobook so that I could listen to it too. I will single-handedly keep the local libraries in my area running with the amount of audiobooks that I take out. So I started this book on the 17th of January and I finished it on the 31st. So First Lie Wins centers around Luca Moreno. That is her legal, real, God-given name. She works for a man named Mr. Smith. And our main character, who goes by several names throughout this book. There's Mia and Wendy and Evelyn and Regina. She's got a lot of different aliases. And the most recent one is named Evelyn Porter, and she is basically like a mole. Mr. Smith sends her on missions to gather information either on other people or to take blackmail that they have on his clients so that they no longer have leverage over them. She's worked jobs everywhere from like Texas to Florida to North Carolina to Louisiana to Georgia, like all across the South. And when she is on a job in Louisiana living as Evelyn Porter, her target is a man named Ryan Sumner. And she gets a little too close to him and they end up getting engaged. And in the present narrative in the story, it's kind of hard to tell how much of her life with Ryan is for the job and how much is what she actually wants. There are several times in the book where she is thinking about, you know, what if this was my actual life? What if it was just me and Ryan and we could actually have this normal life in this beautiful suburb in Louisiana? And she is kind of starting to not really want to work for Mr. Smith anymore, which not really a good sign. You know, you can't really just quit organized crime. You can't just put in your 2 weeks and be like, see you later. Can I have a reference for a new job? So she's in a precarious position, right? And then one of Ryan's childhood friends shows up in their life with his new girlfriend, who looks suspiciously similar to our main character and who goes by the name Luca Moreno. And this kicks off a whole chain of events. There are a lot of deaths that take place. Our main character becomes involved in a murder investigation for one of her old assignments. It gets real messy from there. And our main character is basically trying her best to get herself out of this sticky situation that Mr. Smith is now putting her in, because he is questioning her loyalty. So for what this story evoked within me, I just wrote, this story made me glad to have my own boring life, because my anxiety could never deal with the stuff that our main character is dealing with in this book. Absolutely not. No, I would lose my ever-loving mind like day one of a job. What aspect of the story captured my attention the most? I think figuring out who Mr. Smith was captured my interest the most. I spent a lot of time mulling it over, and in the end, I was right. I would say it was probably about maybe 60% of the way through the book that I figured out who Mr. Smith was. I had a bit of an inkling, but really the more we got to know this character and the more interactions they had with the main character, it really just made me more suspicious, and it turned out that my suspicion was correct. My sniffer led me in the right direction. And then, what insights or wisdom can I glean from this tale? I just said don't get involved in organized crime, even if books make it look like it's cool. Yeah, so this whole story, very fun. Oh, the adventure that she goes on is very twisty and it's so fun, but could never be me. Absolutely not. Like this woman is driving from state to state. She's hacking into people's phones. She is making calls to judges that she has dirt on. Like, she is another level. I'm not built like that. Okay. I'm not the one. I'm not the type. I will gladly read about it, but she's way tougher than I am. And then for the quote, I picked, "You can tell a lot about a person by the way they act when they are left waiting too long." And I believe that this is a quote that is spoken by Devin in the book, who is our main character's friend slash kind of co-worker. He's like the coder. He's the hacker in their little duo. He's the one that, you know, hacks into security systems, gets her in and out, monitors surveillance, is in her ear, feeding her information, that kind of thing. And then he says this to our main character, I think the first time that they meet, because he left her waiting to see what kind of person she is. And I guess she passed his little test. Then for the overall takeaways and favorites, I said that this story was so fun and had some espionage slash spy vibes that I really enjoyed. Though I did figure out who Mr. Smith was long before the reveal, there was enough at play that I did question my conclusion several times. The author even had me straight up thinking I was wrong at one point and had me almost completely abandoning who I thought Mr. Smith was at certain points, until I started rethinking about other things that had happened in the book, and I realized that like there was no way that that person could be Mr. Smith. Yeah, and then I said I don't think I have much more to say other than it was a very fun and twisty book. I did figure out the plot twist, and the ending was okay. I didn't hate it. I didn't love it either. And it did make sense, so I can't be like too upset about that, I guess. Even if it ended and I was like, okay, I guess. So for the characters, I gave them 4 stars, the plot 4, writing style 4, world building 3, pacing 4, structure 4, resolution 3, and overall a 4-star. And the one word summary I gave was just corruption, because everybody in this book is corrupt. Everyone, every single one. They all got corrupt bits about them. I don't think that there is a single person in this book that is not shady. Yeah, no, I'm thinking about it now, and I don't think that there's a single person, main character wise. There are side characters that didn't really do anything. Principal roles, if you will, the principal characters. There's not a single one of them that isn't at least a little bit crooked, you know? They're all corrupt in some way. And by the end of the book, that doesn't really change, honestly. They're still pretty corrupt by the end of the book, just in different ways. So with that is all 6 of the books that I read in January. I yapped a lot. This is actually the second time that I'm recording this video, so I've now talked about 6 books for 3 hours total, because I think the first time I sat for about an hour and a half, and this is also an hour and a half, so it makes sense that it would take me the same amount of time to record this both times, even though I didn't really record anything the first time because my phone died pretty soon after I started filming. So yeah, let me know which review style you prefer. Do you prefer me going through my Goodreads stats and talking off the top of my head about each of the books? Do you like hearing stuff from my reading journal? Would you prefer if I did a bit of both? Let me know what you think. This is a little bit different for me, but I am definitely going to keep using this little journal. I really enjoy writing down my thoughts as soon as I'm done with a book. I've been trying to find different ways to keep track of my thoughts like this over the years. I've tried Google Docs, I've tried notebooks, just, you know, like general notebooks, not ones like this that have prompts and stuff. And none of it has really worked, but I think that like having the prompts and things in here is helping me actually want to fill this out, because it's not just a blank page. There's actually, you know, questions for me to answer and stuff like that. So that makes it a little more fun. Plus this book is so cute. It's so aesthetic, so my aesthetic specifically. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I know it's a bit of a longer one. I went in a bit more detail with the reviews than I normally do, just because I had more material to work with this time around, having the journal and everything. But I hope it was still enjoyable, still informative, still entertaining. If it was, and you did enjoy, go ahead and leave a like down below. Let me know. You should also subscribe while you're down there for new bookish content. And yeah, that's pretty much all I got for y'all today. This is going up on my grandma's birthday, so if you're watching this, Grandma, which I'm 99% sure that you are, happy birthday and happy Groundhog Day. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day wherever you are in the world, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!